Welcome back to the deep dive. We have a stack of sources today that, honestly, sent me down a rabbit hole I wasn't expecting. We are looking at a sound. And I guarantee 100% that you know this sound, even if you think you don't, even if you've never, willingly put on a record from the 1940s. It is. It's just embedded in your cultural DNA.
It really is. It's unavoidable. You hear it in movies, you hear it in commercials, maybe in the background of a video game set in World War II.
Yeah.
It's the sonic wallpaper of the early 40s.
Exactly. We are talking about the music of the swing era, but specifically we are talking about the man who defined it, Alton Glenn Miller.
The one and only.
But here's the thing. When I started reading through the biography and the military reports we have here, I realized this isn't just a behind-the-music story. This is a mystery.
It's a massive mystery.
Okay.
It's arguably the biggest missing persons case in music history.
Right. I think people forget the scale of this. We are talking about the single biggest pop star on the planet vanishing into thin air at the absolute peak of his fame.
And pop star is the right term. I know it sounds a bit anachronistic, but that's what he was.
Well, let's get into that, because I was looking at the numbers in our source material, and I actually had to double-check them because I thought there was a typo.
The chart statistics.
The chart statistics. I saw a comparison in the notes that put Glenn Miller up against Elvis and the Beatles.
Which sounds like hyperbole.
It does. My first thought was, okay, that's cute. They're trying to hype up a trombone player. But then I looked at the actual data.
It is startling, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. So lay it out for us. How big was he, really?
Well, okay, if we are just looking at number one hits,
Yeah.
inside a span of just 4 years, Glenn Miller scored more number one records than Elvis Presley or the Beatles would later achieve.
In their entire career.
In their entire careers.
That breaks my brain a little bit. 4 years.
4 years. We're talking 16 number one hits and 69 top 10 hits.
69. That is dominance on a level that I don't think we see today. Maybe Taylor Swift comes close in terms of, market saturation. But even then, there's so much noise today. Back then, Glenn Miller was the radio.
He was. And yet the mission of this deep dive isn't just to marvel at the numbers, it's to figure out how. How does a guy playing the trombone, which, let's be honest, isn't the sexiest instrument in the band?
Not at all.
How does he become a rock star before rock stars existed?
And then the second part of the mission, what actually happened over the English Channel in 1944?
Because the ending of this story is so abrupt. It's like watching a movie and the projector bulb burns out right before the climax.
That's a perfect analogy. He disappears, leaving behind an empty grave and a legacy that refuses to die.
But to understand the tragedy, we have to understand the man. And this is where the sources get interesting, because Glenn Miller wasn't your typical, tortured artistic genius.
No, he definitely wasn't. I was expecting stories about him being a child prodigy, playing concertos at age 3. But the reality is, well, it's a lot more Midwestern.
Very Midwestern. He was born in Iowa in 1904. Then the family moved to Nebraska, then Missouri, then Colorado. This was a childhood defined by dust and hard work.
There is one anecdote in particular that I absolutely loved. It's about how he got his first trombone. It wasn't a gift from a wealthy patron or something.
Yeah, not at all. It was 1915. The family is living in Missouri, and trombones are expensive pieces of brass. So at age 11, Glenn Miller gets a job milking cows to pay for it.
I just have this image of him, it's freezing cold, it's early morning, and the future king of swing is sitting on a stool in a barn, milking a cow, just dreaming of sliding that trombone slide.
It's pure grit.
Totally.
It sets the tone for his entire career. He was a hustler. He wasn't waiting for inspiration to strike. He was working for it.
And he wasn't just a band geek either, which surprised me. The sources point out that when the family moved to Fort Morgan, Colorado, he was a legitimate high school athlete.
Yeah, best left end in Colorado, right?
That's the title he got in 1921. He played high school football. And he was the editor of the yearbook.
Which brings up a funny little detail about his sort of personal branding.
Oh, the spelling issue.
Yeah, he couldn't decide on his own name.
I saw that in the notes. It seems he couldn't decide who he was.
Right. In the yearbooks that he himself edited, he would spell his name Glenn with one N, and then on the next page it would be Glenn with 2 N's.
It's relatable, though. He's a teenager trying to figure out his signature. Which one looks better on a marquee? Turns out the 2 N's won.
Thankfully. But this drive, this need to succeed, it hits a brick wall when he gets to college. Yeah. And this is the part of the story that I think gives hope to anyone who has ever failed a class.
Oh, this is my favorite fact in the entire stack. So he goes to the University of Colorado at Boulder. He joins a fraternity. He's playing music on the side, to make some cash. But he drops out.
And he doesn't drop out because he's too cool for school. He drops out because he flunks.
Yeah, he failed 3 out of his 5 classes in 1 semester.
And one of those classes, tell him what one of the classes was.
It was harmony.
Harmony.
The man who would go on to define the harmonic structure of an entire generation of music failed the academic subject of harmony.
It's the ultimate irony.
It is. It just proves that textbook theory and what actually sounds good to the human ear are 2 very different things. Or maybe he just was too busy playing gigs to study.
It was likely a mix of both. He was already working. He was already out there playing dance halls. He probably looked at the textbook and thought, that's not how we do it in the real world. So he leaves school and he hits the road.
And this is what our sources call the wandering years.
Mm-hmm.
He's a freelance trombonist. He's an arranger. He's working with legends, right?
He is. He's in the trenches with Benny Goodman, with the Dorsey brothers. This is the late 20s, early 30s. Jazz is exploding. But Miller isn't a star. Not even close.
He's a sideman.
Exactly. He's the guy you hire to make the charts look neat and the brass section sound tight. He's reliable, but he's not the main event.
And he tries to launch his own band in 1937.
And it bombs.
Total failure.
Complete and utter failure. The band broke up in 1938. He's broke. He's in his mid-30s, and he's looking at a dead end.
That is a terrifying place to be. You've given your life to this, and the market says no thanks.
But this is where the genius kicks in. He realizes why he failed.
Yep.
It wasn't because he wasn't good enough.
It was because he wasn't different enough.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
He realized he sounded like everyone else. If you turned on the radio in 1938, every band was trying to sound like Benny Goodman or Count Basie. Miller realized he needed a unique selling proposition. He needed a sonic brand.
So let's get technical for a second, but keep it simple for me. What was the Miller sound? Because when I hear "in the mood," I hear a big wall of sound. But what's happening under the hood?
It's a very specific voicing trick. So in a standard swing band, you have your sections. The saxophones play together, the trumpets play together, the trombones play together. They usually stay in their lanes.
Right. Everyone has their part.
Miller decided to break the lanes. He took a clarinet, a woodwind instrument, usually high and piercing, and he put it on the melody line. Then he had a tenor saxophone play the exact same note.
So they are doubling each other.
Yes, but the tickers, the textures of the instruments verge in this really unique way. And then underneath that, he had 3 other saxophones playing very tight harmony within a single octave.
So it's dense.
It is incredibly dense. And that combination, the clarinet sweetening the sax giving body to the clarinet, created this sound that was metallic but soft. It was like velvet.
Velvet is the perfect word. It sounds smooth.
And nobody else was doing it. There's a great quote from Miller in Metronome magazine from 1939. He says, "I don't want stereotyped intros."
He knew what he was doing.
He knew exactly what he was doing. He said, the 5th sax playing clarinet lets you know whose band you're listening to. And that's about all there is to it.
He was building a brand. He wasn't just making art. He was making a product that you could identify in 3 seconds.
And that is the difference between a musician and a mogul.
So the brand is built. The sound is locked in. And now we enter the golden era. Section 2 of our outline, dominance. And we threw those stats out earlier, 16 number ones, but I want to talk about how that felt for the average person in America.
Well, think about how we consume music now. You have Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music. You have millions of choices.
An infinite scroll of music.
Exactly. In 1940, you had the radio and you had the jukebox.
The jukebox was the algorithm of the day.
It was. Time magazine reported in 1939 that if you walked into a diner or a bar, there were usually 12 to 24 records in the jukebox. They estimated that in every single jukebox in America, 2 to 6 of those discs were Glenn Miller.
That is inescapable. That is like opening Instagram, TikTok, and turning on the TV and seeing the same person on all of them.
And it wasn't just volume, it was sales. We have to talk about Chattanooga Choo Choo.
Oh, classic. Pardon me, boy.
That song was a monster. In 1942, RCA Victor actually had to invent an award for it. They presented Glenn Miller with the first ever gold record.
Wait, the gold record concept didn't exist before him?
Not formally. Not as we know it. But Chattanooga Choo Choo sold 1.2 million copies. That was unheard of. So they took a master disc, sprayed it with gold lacquer, and gave it to him live on a radio broadcast.
That is a cool piece of trivia. He literally set the gold standard.
He did. The band was in movies, too. Sun Valley Serenade, Orchestra Wives. They were a multimedia juggernaut.
But And there is always a but in these stories. Not everyone was happy about this. You would think the jazz community would be thrilled that a jazz band was the biggest thing in the world.
You'd think?
But looking at the critiques from the time, they were brutal.
They were vicious. And this touches on a debate that still happens in music today. Commercialism versus authenticity.
The sellout argument.
Exactly. The jazz critics, the purists, hated Glenn Miller.
Why? Just because he was too popular?
That was part of it. But it was also because of how he played. Jazz, especially in the 30s, was supposed to be hot. It was supposed to be about improvisation, spontaneity, soul. Think of Count Basie, Duke Ellington. It was supposed to be a little dangerous.
And Miller was safe.
Miller was engineering. His band was letter perfect. They rehearsed endlessly. There was very little improvisation. If you went to see Glenn Miller, you heard the record exactly as it was recorded. No surprises.
So the critics saw him as a robot.
They called it commercial novelty. They said it lacked feeling. They basically accused him of taking the soul out of jazz and replacing it with a metronome.
I can see that point of view, but I can also hear Miller's response. He didn't care, did he?
Not at all. He was unapologetic. He famously said, "I don't want a jazz band."
He just said it straight out.
Straight out. He said, "I want to please the listeners." He knew that the guy working in the factory or the girl at the soda fountain didn't want a 15-minute frenetic trumpet solo. They wanted a melody they could hum and a beat they could dance to.
He was a populist.
He was. But, and this is important, while the critics sneered, the real musicians didn't.
Who are we talking about?
Well, for starters, Louis Armstrong.
The king.
The king, Sashmo. Louis Armstrong carried Glenn Miller's recordings with him on tour. He listened to them on his own time for pleasure. Frank Sinatra said he wished he could record music of that quality.
Wow. So the people who actually understood the mechanics of it.
The people who actually played the instruments knew. They knew that achieving that level of blend and perfection is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
It might sound easy, but it's the hardest thing to do.
It's the difference between a jam session and a symphony.
Precisely. It's a different kind of virtuosity.
So 1942, Miller is at the absolute peak. He's on top of the world. And we have to talk about the money again because it sets up the sacrifice. The notes say he was making $20,000 a week.
Yes. Now, inflation calculators can be tricky, but if we adjust that to $2024, that is roughly $385,000.
Per week.
That is nearly $20 million a year. In 1942, he is wealthy beyond imagination. He is 38 years old. He's married. He wears glasses. And the draft board classifies him as 3A, which means deferred due to dependency, or basically low priority. The military did not want him. He was too old, and he was too valuable as a taxpayer.
So he could have sat in his mansion in New Jersey, counted his money, and waited out the war.
Easily. Nobody would have blamed him. In fact, people probably expected him to.
But he doesn't. And this is where the character of the man really shines through. He walks away from $20,000 a week to volunteer for the Army.
He actually tried the Navy first.
He shopped around for a uniform.
He did. He approached the Navy, and they turned him down. They were afraid of a scandal. There was a lot of sensitivity about celebrities getting cushy commissions. They didn't want to look like they were handing out favors.
So the Navy said no, but the Army?
The Army eventually said yes. He fought to get in. He wrote letters. He pulled strings. He was determined.
So he trades his tailored suits for fatigues. But he didn't just want to carry a rifle, right? He had a vision.
He was a man with a plan. He wrote a letter to a brigadier general and basically said, "I want to be put in charge of a modernized Army band." He wanted to streamline military music.
What does that mean? What did military music sound like back then?
Well, up until 1942, military music meant one thing: John Philip Sousa.
The Stars and Stripes forever?
Exactly. Oom-pa-pa, marches, very stiff, very traditional. It was music from World War I. Miller argued that the soldiers fighting in World War II were swing kids. They didn't march to Sousa, they jitterbugged. He wanted to bring the sound of 1942 into the Army.
I imagine the generals loved that idea.
Oh, they hated it. There was massive friction. There's a famous story where a major reprimanded Miller for his arrangement of the St. Louis Blues.
A blues song.
Miller arranged it as a march, a swinging march. And the major said, "That's not a march." And Miller, now a captain himself, basically said, "Tell that to the soldiers."
He knew his audience.
He did. And despite the pushback from the Army purists, the result was undeniable. He formed the Major Glenn Miller Army Air Forces Orchestra. And this wasn't just a dance band. This was a supergroup.
He had the budget of the U.S. Army behind him.
He could get anyone he wanted. He raided the symphonies. He had string sections, violins, cellos mixed with the best jazz players who had been drafted. It was massive, lush, and powerful.
And the soldiers loved it.
They adored it. General James Doolittle, the hero of the Doolittle Raid, told Miller that, next to a letter from home, his band was the greatest morale booster in the European theater.
Next to a letter from home, that really puts it in perspective. It wasn't just entertainment. For those guys in the trenches, that sound, that Miller sound, was a connection to the girls they left behind, soda shops, the normalcy.
It was a lifeline. It was a piece of America delivered right to the front lines.
So, he's in England. It's late 1944. The Allies have landed at Normandy. Paris has been liberated. And Miller is preparing to move this massive musical operation from London to Paris to be closer to the troops. And this brings us to Section 4, the disappearance.
December 15th, 1944. We need to set the scene here because the environment is the biggest culprit in this story.
It's winter in England.
It's miserable. Thick fog, freezing temperatures, what's called pea soup fog. The English Channel is churned up. Miller is stressed. He's a perfectionist, remember. He needs to be in Paris to set up the arrangements, get the hall ready for the band's arrival.
But all the scheduled flights are grounded.
Everything is grounded. No official transport is moving. He's stuck. And for a guy like Miller, being stuck is torture.
He's a man of action.
Exactly. He's pacing, he's angry. And then he bumps into an acquaintance at the officers' club, or the airfield Lieutenant Colonel Norman Bessel.
And Bessel isn't a transport pilot, right? He's not with the regular transport command.
No. Aesel is. Well, the sources describe him as a bit of a cowboy. He had a small plane, a Nordøen UC-64 Norseman. It's a single-engine utility aircraft. Canvas covered, basically a flying truck.
Not exactly a luxury liner.
Not at all. And Bessel says, hey, I'm flying to Paris, hop in.
It was a casual flight.
Casual is the military term for unauthorized. No flight plan was filed with the main transport command. He didn't tell his superiors. He essentially hitchhiked on a buddy's plane.
And this decision, this moment of impatience, is what killed him.
It was. They take off from RAF Twinwood Farm at 1:55 p.m. There are 3 people on board. Miller, Bessel, and the pilot, John Morgan.
And they fly into the soup.
They fly straight into the fog. And that is the last time anyone ever saw Alton Glenn Miller.
Now here's the part that is haunting. Because it was an unauthorized flight, nobody knew he was gone.
Right. It wasn't on any official manifest. His unit thought he was already in Paris or waiting for another flight. The unit in Paris thought he was still in England.
So no one raised the alarm.
No one. The band arrived in Paris a few days later, expecting to see him. And he wasn't there.
And the timing is horrific.
The very next morning, December 16th, the Germans launched the Battle of the Bulge. The entire Western Front exploded into chaos. The Army had bigger problems than a missing band leader.
So communications were a mess. Everything was focused on the battle.
Exactly. It wasn't until December 18th, 3 days later, that the command really said, wait, where is Major Miller? By then, it was far too late.
Now, whenever someone this famous disappears, the conspiracy theories start. I've heard them all over the years. He was a spy on a secret mission to assassinate Hitler. He was killed in a brothel in Paris, and they covered it up.
There's always a brothel story.
Always. And the friendly fire one. That one seems to have legs.
The friendly fire one was very popular for a long time. The theory was that returning bombers, jettisoning their unused bombs over the channel to land safely, accidentally hit his small plane.
It sounds plausible. It's the kind of tragic accident that happens in war.
It does, but the source material we have, specifically the work by Dennis Sprague and Glenn Miller, Declassified, completely debunks this. Sprague got access to all the declassified military records. They looked at the flight logs, the bombing mission reports. The bombers weren't in that sector at that time.
So, no spies, no friendly fire. What really happened?
The most boring and tragic answer is usually the right one. Physics and weather.
Simple as that.
The Norseman aircraft had a carburetor. In cold, moist air, like a foggy December day, over-the-channel carburetors are prone to icing.
The ice jerks the engine.
Exactly. The ice builds up, blocks the fuel-air mixture. The engine likely coughed and died. The pilot wasn't instrument rated for those conditions. He was flying low to try and see the water. The engine quits, they hit the water in seconds.
And in the English Channel in December, you don't survive that.
Hypothermia would be instant. And the plane? Well, it's mostly wood and canvas. It would break apart on impact or sink into the silt at the bottom of the channel. It's never been found.
It's so sudden. 1 minute you are the voice of a generation, the next you are just gone.
And there is a cruel irony here. He had this idea of the Miller luck.
Tell me about that.
Miller believed he was lucky. Just before he left for Paris while he was staying in London, a V-1 flying bomb, a buzz bomb, landed directly on his quarters.
Blew it up.
Flattened it.
Yeah.
Killed nearly 100 people in the building. But Miller wasn't there. He had moved the band to Bedford the day before. He reportedly told a lieutenant, "As long as the Miller luck stays with us, we have nothing to worry about."
He thought he was invincible.
You used up all his luck dodging that bomb. Less than a month later, the luck ran out over the water.
And because the plane was never found, there's no closure, there's no body, no funeral, just silence.
Just silence.
But, and this is the testament to what he built, the music didn't stay silent. Which brings us to Section 5, the legacy. Usually when a band leader dies, the band folds. Maybe they do a tribute concert and then everyone goes home.
Right. It's over. But the Glenn Miller Orchestra is different. It became a franchise.
A ghost band.
The ultimate ghost band.
Yeah.
After the war, the Miller estate authorized an official band led by Tex Beneke, who was a sax player and a singer in the original group.
A familiar face to lead the charge.
Exactly. But even that had drama.
Of course.
Beneke wanted to evolve. He wanted to play new songs, new arrangements. He was a musician. He wanted to grow. But the Miller estate said, no. The brand is the sound. Play the hits exactly how Glenn wrote them.
Don't mess with the formula.
Precisely. And eventually, they split. It was a messy, acrimonious divorce. But since then, the estate has authorized official Glenn Miller orchestras. There was one for the U.S., one for the U.K., one for Europe, one for Scandinavia.
It's like the McDonald's of swing music. You know exactly what you're going to get anywhere in the world.
And it keeps the music alive for new generations. But his legacy isn't just in the civilian world. He is considered the father of modern U.S. military bands. Well, the Airmen of Note, the premier jazz ensemble of the Air Force, was created specifically to carry on his tradition. He proved that modern popular music had a place in the military, that it was a powerful tool for morale.
So every time you hear a military band playing a jazz number, that's Glenn Miller's DNA.
Absolutely.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to pivot to something weird. Because we've painted a picture of this guy. Strict, perfectionist, serious military officer. But our research stack included a note about his habits that is just bizarre.
The true fact section.
Yes.
We have to talk about the snacks.
We do. Apparently, when Miller was writing music, he had a ritual, a very specific combination of foods that he felt fueled his creativity.
I'm going to read this list from the notes, and I need you to tell me if this sounds like the diet of a musical genius.
I'm ready.
Okay. He claimed this mix helped him write Chattanooga Choo Choo. It is. Bury black pudding, Lancashire cheese, and Fiddler's Lancashire sauce-flavored crisps.
Wait, what?
That's what it says. Sauce-flavored crisps. Flavored potato chips in 1941. Was he a time traveler? I know. That detail in the source material stopped me in my tracks, too. I mean, that has to be a modern embellishment or a misunderstanding, right?
It must be. I don't think Lay's was doing barbecue back then, let alone Lancashire sauce.
It's likely that the source material we have is referencing a modern tribute snack or maybe a specific local legend that has gotten mixed up with modern branding. But the core of it, the black pudding and the cheese, that is very specific.
Black pudding is blood sausage, right?
It is. It's a very hearty, very heavy British, specifically Northern English food.
So imagine this. The guy who writes Moonlight Serenade, this delicate, shimmering piece of music, is sitting there chowing down on blood sausage and heavy cheese.
And washing it down with a Bolin Brewery Pilsner, according to the notes.
It just humanizes him, doesn't it? It breaks the robot image. He was a guy who liked his weird snacks.
It does. It reminds us that behind the uniform and the baton, he was just a person with very particular and maybe questionable tastes.
So as we close the book on Glenn Miller, what is the takeaway? Why are we still talking about him 80 years later?
I think the final assessment is that Miller's music was a safe space before we use that term. You have to remember the context. The world was on fire. People were dying by the millions. There was chaos, rationing, fear.
And here comes this music that is orderly.
Exactly. It was precise. It was harmonious. It was sweet. It wasn't about wild anxiety or chaotic improvisation. It was about comfort. It sounded like home.
It was the audio equivalent of a warm blanket.
It was. And the fact that he has an empty grave. There is a memorial headstone at Arlington National Cemetery, placed at his daughter's request, and his name is on the wall of the missing in Cambridge. But no body. It freezes him.
He never got old.
He never put out a bad disco album in the 70s. He never lost his hair. He never became irrelevant. He vanished at the exact moment his style of music was at its absolute zenith.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought. If Glenn Miller had survived that flight, if the carburetor hadn't frozen, what would have happened to him and his music?
It's the great what if. The war ended in 45. By the late 40s, Bebop was taking over jazz-fast, complex, aggressive. Everything Miller's music wasn't. By the mid-50s, Elvis and rock and roll were kicking down the door.
Would Miller have adapted?
That's the question. Would the man who hated wild jazz and valued perfection have embraced the electric guitar? Would he have worked with Elvis? Or would he have become a grumpy old man, fighting against the tide of history, complaining about the noise the kids were listening to?
We will never know. He remains forever 40 years old, somewhere over the English Channel, playing the soundtrack of the greatest generation.
A perfectionist to the end.
And on that note, we're going to sign off. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the mystery of Glenn Miller. We'll catch you on the next one.